All right, so go ahead. Sit comfortably in your chair. Your feet resting on the floor and your hands folded in your lap. Shoulders relaxed. Your head balanced on your neck, neither too far forward or too far back. In fact, your whole back is upright without tension as you can get it. Not arching your lower back too far or hunched over in your upper back. Just let your vertebrae stack like blocks a child is piling up. So you can sit comfortably without having to work too hard. We'll start with the bell. Take one deep breath with each ring of the bell. So in and out. All continuing to pulse very lightly. Continue breathing, following your breath. Relaxed breath. You don't need to make it a deep breath, long breath, or even a short breath. Let your breath be long if it's long, and short if it's short. Do the best you can to just follow your breath. Being present to it, being part of it as best as you can, so that you feel your belly rise as you breathe in and fall as you breathe out. Breathing in and breathing out. We've watched this cycle before. How when you fully breathed all the air out, you don't even need to push it out that far. Just give a little hug around your abdomen to get the last of the breath out. And your in-breath just automatically starts to come, since nature doesn't like a vacuum. Your lungs fill. You don't really even need to think about a deep breath. I find when I'm present to my breath, I just automatically make it a complete breath, rather than breathing just halfway down. Once your lungs are filled, they're like a balloon that you just open the knot on it and let the air go out. And then give that last little breath, that last little hug around the center to push the last of it out. And you'll notice in that moment when you've completed the out breath, there's that pause. And then the next breath begins. Breathing in and breathing out. And it's interesting sometimes to, as closely as you can, pay attention to that little pause. That moment just in between the end of one breath and the beginning of the next. Kind of a moment that's filled with potential, that's ripe. Who knows what that next breath will be? Who knows what will happen in that next moment? And at the same time, we have to let go of that last breath. No sitting and thinking, well, that was a good breath. I followed it well. Just have to be present to that pause and ready for the next breath. And I was thinking last night, I was talking to someone, a friend in Louisiana, telling him how it was still cold that night, and that though things can't make up their minds whether they want to be winter or spring yet. We have hot days and cold days, hot nights and cold nights. So we're just on the tip, on the razor's edge between winter and spring. And we're about to fully tip in. But we're in that pause, that moment between one breath and the next, that moment where it's not quite winter and not quite spring. And it's so interesting to pay attention to those pauses, those in-between times. It's where we truly don't know what will happen next. When we're in the midst of an in-breath or an out-breath, we know clearly what it is. When we're in the midst of winter, we know what kind of coat to wear. And in spring, in between, we just don't know. We have to exist in that in-between space of dropping what's behind us, being ready for the next moment, but not being sure what that is that will be ahead of us. Thinking about those in-between times, I was thinking about the Tibetan Buddhists who had a book. They translated it as the Tibetan Book of the Dead years ago, that talks about that space in between lives, where we haven't quite left this life behind. And then when we have, there's that moment of really just not being anywhere or being everywhere before we go on to the next form we take, as they believe we continue doing that. And they teach that in that moment you have to be completely present and ready and see how everything that's happening is part of you, that you need to be ready to face it without fear or worry. And one reason they teach that, one reason a lot of us in the 60s and 70s are reading those books, was because it seemed like a good way to live. Because when you begin to look, you see that everything is that in-between space. They called it the bardo, which really is that in-between space. Even on that smallest level, that pause between breaths, or between one breath and the next. And when we're in the midst of one in-breath, moved on from that space, and we're standing astride the last breath, the next breath. So much of this life is like being in a waiting room. And you can probably see how you do when you're in those in-between phases just by how you react when you're in a waiting room. Do you get angry and frustrated if you haven't been called in the doctor's office? Or do you make use of the time? These days we read our phones, there's no magazines in those places anymore. Or just sitting quietly and being at peace and watching your breath. You say our whole life is made up of being in between the last breath and the next breath. Yesterday, tomorrow, between the past and the future. We sometimes talk about how this mindfulness is about being able to be really present to what's happening right now. And it's not a popular thing to say, but I think sometimes we can get overly focused on this present moment. So that's what people really push themselves to do. And they have some pride that they're being present in this moment, that they're living for right now. But it is important to see that this current moment, this pause in between the last moment and the next, is where we're truly free of those two moments. The past is gone. The future we don't really even know. Who knows what we could be surprised by in the next moment. But this moment, one thing that's important about it is that it's the only place where we can do anything. It's the only place where we can see ourselves and see this moment. If there's something we need to do, something we need to change, some person we need to help, or just meeting another person, meeting that moment, it can only happen now. All the planning in the world really doesn't make any difference when the real moment comes, the thing we've been planning for. I heard someone years ago say, it made a lot of sense to me, that planning is not preparation. So often that planning is just another form of worry or of trying to control what we can't control. We know we can't control the past, but we still like to think we can control the future. But we don't know what's coming. This is the only moment in which we can do anything. And the best way to know what that moment requires of us is to be still in the midst of this spinning, things turning so quickly from past to future. It feels like we're on a razor's edge between spring and winter. You can feel like we're on the razor's edge between the past and the future. Or it's like a spinning top. The one point that doesn't move is the point the top spins on. Everything else is moving around that one place, exactly in the center of spinning, is the one still place, really, still in the midst of movement. And so by becoming still for that moment ourselves, we can be with it, we can be present to it and ready as things spin quickly from the past to the future. And it's not a dead kind of stillness. It's the same stillness we find when we're doing this practice. When we pause, we're aware of that pause between our breath out as our belly falls and our breath in as we begin the next breath. And there's the breath out and the pause and the next breath. Oddly, it's the best place to be and the best way to meet what's coming next. If we're all worried about what's next, trying to plan for it, come up with a solution to every possible thing that we could meet, every outcome that we want to see, we're so tensed we can barely move. But this kind of stillness is very alive, calm and still, and ready to react if that's what's necessary. Or ready to say, oh, it's not yet time to react. It's okay to just stay in this still point. It's a very alive and free point, and it's kind of the opposite of stillness. That point, the center axis of the top, everything is turning around it. And it may be moving. If you've ever spun a top, you know how it moves across the floor or the tabletop. So even though it's still and in the center, things are still moving around it, and it's moving. And seeing things as that in-between space lets you see the past and the future for what they are. To see that one, we need to let go of the past, and we need to let go of the future, but in a different way. To know we can't control it, can't be ready for everything that might happen. So that it's all about letting go and just standing firmly in this moment with both feet. There's a saying that is a little vulgar, but it says if you're standing with one foot in the past and one in the future, all you end up doing is peeing right on the present. Instead, you can draw your feet together. Quit trying to stand in those two places at once and just be in this place right now. It's where you can see everything, where you can see who you are, see the world. In that stillness, you can find it all. So during this next week, take the time when you can to just pause in the midst of that spinny, crazy top of a day. Just be still for a moment. See what that's like. See how it feels, and see if it makes you feel more ready for what's to come. It also makes you feel more grateful and present to what's happening right now. So we'll ring the bell. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and we'll step into this next space between this week's exercise and next week's.